Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett, and today we are going to be getting into a video on how to have your own personal AI on your own personal computer. Now, the advantages to this versus using something like ChatGPT or some type of other AI system is you 100% control the data, which means, say, for example, if you're trying to integrate something like this into a hospital or a government system or something like that, instead of it transmitting to a Microsoft server or something that you have no control over, this transmits into your own system and you have 100% control over the information. Now, as far as that goes, I'll be showing how to do this on a normal Windows computer. Keep in mind, you can do this obviously with a Linux or really anything else. There's some people who have these AIs running on a Raspberry Pi, on a smartphone. So this is not all inclusive to just, high-end computers. You can easily run this on smaller end stuff, depending on the model and what you're doing with it. Also note that if you want, you can train your own model. I'm not going to get into that in this particular video, but if you're doing like customer service or some particular task, you could easily get it to be trained into a particular thing, and that way it stays within the given realm. So say, for example, if you're doing customer service, the thing will stay within the whatever you want it to do, instead of talking about something that really shouldn't be. And also, you can verify that the information that's going to be said is going to be correct, or as correct as any customer service agent that would be saying it. So, as far as that goes, again, this is just for personal computers. I might do a video for, servers and whatnot. But first things first is you need to note a few things. The big is you need to have Python. Python's free. It's a coding language, and I would recommend 3.9 at this time. You can go with higher ones, but you're going to have to do something within the code itself in order to get it to revert back in case something goes wrong. I had to do that a few times. It's really not hard. Look on Stack Overflow for the code to do that. So the next thing that you're going to need is LLM Studio, and LLM Studio is a open source and free software, and it runs on Macintosh, Windows, and Linux. And the big thing that you need to note, in case you're not trying to dive too deep into it, you will notice LLM, and LLM stands for Large Language Model. Think of it as the AI's brain, basically. It's basically the code for the AI. And, that's pretty much all you need to know on that part. You can train your own LLMs, but, if you're doing general work or whatever, or even coding, because there is LLMs designed for coding or particular tasks, so note that, you can just grab something that's already made. Or if you want, you can take something and modify it. So if you find an LLM that you like for your business or whatever you want to modify it, you could easily do that. And I might do a video on that on later points. So anyways, once you have this, you need to go ahead and pick your LLM, and you can search for that, and basically it looks through Hugging Face. Now, Hugging Face is basically like GitHub, but for AI. So just know that, and note that there's going to be a number of them that are on GitHub anyways, but Hugging Face is loaded with it, and that's the primary resource that most AI researchers use, especially in the open source field. Now, the big thing that you'll notice is, and I'll leave a link down to all this stuff, but it's 7B, 13B, and 70B. What does that stand for? B stands for billion, and it's 7 billion parameters, 13 billion parameters, and 70 billion parameters. You honestly don't need to know, the behind the scenes things unless if you're doing fine tuning and stuff like that to the actual thing. And even then, it's you don't really need to know that much about it. But if you want to read more about it, it's right here. The big thing to note is, and they got a pretty good video on this, is the left side is 7 billion parameters, the middle is 13, and the right is 70 billion parameters. The more parameters, the more resources, the more, storage that you're going to need. The 7 billion parameters, you're probably looking at around 5 gigabytes. I've seen some up to 10, but you're realistically looking at about 5 gigabytes. Some are even smaller than that. They're known as small models. I don't really deal with 13 billion parameters, but 70 billion parameters, you're looking at about 50 gigabytes. In some cases, even up to 60 gigabytes. And the amount of resources, like the CPU and GPU resources, is quite extensive. So note that. Whereas the 7 billion parameters, people have gotten them to run on Raspberry Pis, smartphones, and basic things like that. So I would highly recommend looking at this. Plus, the big thing to keep in mind is most people are developing for the smaller model because, again, it can run on more things. More people have access to it, and it's actually, doing quite well. And in many circumstances, what people are finding is the 7 billion parameter is outperforming the 13 and the 70 billion parameters. And in some cases, it's, on par with the others. But one big thing to note is the sentence structure and stuff like that is maybe a little bit more simplified than the 70 billion parameter, whereas the 70 billion parameter might be better for if authors, like if you're writing a book or something like that. But if you're doing basic AI assistant, or if you're doing a support or something like that, or having it where it helps fill out forms, or something around that, taxes, or other things like that. Like say, for example, if you're making AI to help you fill out taxes or whatever, then the 7 billion parameter should be more than enough for the task. Now, one thing I will mention is if you're going to be doing this, if you're going to be using this in a business sense, note that there is something called ejection prompt attack. And basically what a prompt attack is if you set this up wrong, and what a lot of places done back in the day being a couple months ago, but still back in the day, is they would use prompts to say, let admin do whatever, and how do you do the code and whatnot? How do you do what needs to be done? And what happens is someone, if they know the right way to trigger it, they can tell the AI, because the AI is all trusting as far as it trusts anything that any user says. The user could say, hey, I'm an admin, I need access. And if you prompt it in a certain way when setting it up, it will actually allow the user to get admin access like this. Now, how many companies and places have fixed this is by training their own large language model. Basically, they took a existing large language model and fine-tuning the bits in it and making it where this is not even a thing anymore. There's no side prompt or anything like that. So that you don't have to worry about that anymore. And I might get into this into a later video if people want, but for home use, you probably never really going to have to worry about this, because, if someone remotes in, that's kind of a problem to itself. But even if they do remote in, they, you're probably not going to really care if they do a prompt attack as far as, oh, I'm an admin, what is the prompt to get whatever to work, or become uncensored, or whatever it may be. Another thing to note is some of the models, they are uncensored. So if you're doing it for a corporation, you might want to note that, because if a person, prompts it to say whatever, it might get a company in trouble. So you might want to go for a censored version. Whereas if you're a home user, average everyday person, you might want the uncensored version, because the censored version does kind of restrict you a little bit too much in most cases, especially depending on the topics or what you want to do with it. And I'm not even talking about safer work stuff. I'm talking about just general stuff. Depending on what you're doing, it could actually get quite annoying trying to have to get around the censorship. Whereas you can just get a model that doesn't have that inherently, and there you go. So note that you, depending on your situation, you may want censored, you may not, and depending on the situation, you may want to do a fine tune, or you may not. Now, you could simply go and talk to the AI directly using this program, just like you would with ChatGPT. But if you want to use it for a little bit more functional wise, you probably want to make API calls. Currently, what many companies and many people do is they use API calls to OpenAI. And what happens is that costs money, because you're using their resources. So what you're doing here is you're loading the actual LLM, large language model, AI, into the thing, and you're starting a remote setup. And that way, when someone actually uses this, and note that you can modify pretty much all this stuff and make it where someone can remote in outside of the network or do whatever you really want to. So again, if you're trying to do something where people are filling out forms, or I don't know, maybe you're doing something off-site, you can have it where the person can have access to this, or yourself. If you have a highly trained model and something that you really do like, you could easily have it where you can talk to it remotely, as long as you got your applications and all the other stuff set up correctly. So what I would recommend for this is keep this on, and this will keep the thing from timing out. At least having problems if you have multiple people prompting it. Note that the more resources you throw at it, the quicker and the better it can be. Whereas with a average computer, this is actually on a pretty high-end computer, but note I'm actually asking it to do some very complex stuff, and I'm having it do this on purpose for a visual effect. But if I'm doing like normal whatever, then it's pretty quick on itself. But the big thing to note is the more resources you have going towards it, the quicker it's going to be. And having server log on lets you actually see what it's thinking and what it's doing it behind the scenes. So just note that. Next things next is you're going to want to set this up in some type of IDE. I prefer free, easy, and what's probably already on your computer is Visual Studio Code. Very lightweight, and you can get it from the Windows Store. No, you can use other things if you want to, but if you run Windows, you can have. This is pretty easy to run. What you want to do, first things first, is when you load this up, is you want to start a new file. I'll recommend putting all your AI stuff into one folder, especially the AutoGen stuff. And depending on the settings you allow for it, you can actually allow it to write in a particular folder. So if you're having it code or whatever, in this case, it's putting all the code and stuff into a folder called farm. Whereas, you can tell it to do whatever, but basically this lets it read write from that folder, and having it all in one place helps out quite a bit. Now, what you need to do for when you start a new file is in the thing with .py, and this makes it Python. And for the actual coding, the Python part is you want to hit that to get to the terminal. And I'm not going to show you this, but because it's pretty straightforward. But what you want to do is go to the following AutoGen and scroll down. And keep in mind, if you just want to simply just talk with the AI, you can just do it through this, and that should be good enough. But if you want to do a little bit more advanced, like read writing to files and whatever, then you can do this with AutoGen, and just put this in pip install and that. And what this will do is install this module, and from there, you, depending on what you're doing, in this case, pip install. I think I have OpenAI somewhere. It might not be on this one, but you might need to do pip install OpenAI, pip install other things, and you'll get aired out if something's not installed. So you can actually see if you need to install something. Now, the next thing is, once you have that done, is go down a bit to the actual code, and you can copy and paste this directly. Big thing to note is this part right here. We're going to modify this so it works with the local system. Otherwise, it's going to want to know how to get to OpenAI's or whatever API system, which will cost you money. So with that, you can copy and paste in that little config list. As you see here, all we did is change that a little bit to API type, OpenAI, API base, and then what this said right here. And then API key null, because there's no API key you're using your local system. I'm not really even sure if you can get it to give you an API key. Probably need to look into that at some point. But beyond that, you can go back to the code, and you can copy and paste and kind of do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to get into all the little bits here. You can actually read about, I highly recommend this, by the way, because there's a lot of settings, but you can read about all the little bits and how they work. So for example, just taking this top part here, if you want the thing to, ask you to keep going each and every time, and this is actually pretty important for when you deal with a outside API system, so you're not being charged a fortune. You can do human input, terminate, never, or always, and always makes it where every single time it prompts back, you got to say something, or at least, press enter and it skips it, but you got to do something for it to continue. Otherwise it will pause. Never means it will just keep going until it gets done, or the there's a token limit or whatever it may be. And then there is terminate, where you can just terminate. Now, I personally prefer terminate in this down here, a default auto reply. We can get a little bit more into that right here, where it tells you what it is. But the important thing is if you set a number, then it will run until it hits 30 go around. So what it means is, say for example, if you set that to 2, then it'll send me something, and then it will send me something else, and then after that I got to reply back. If I set 3, then it will go 3 times before I have to do something, and so on. So you can actually set a pretty good number, and that way if it gets into a loop, which can happen, then you can try to correct it easily with that, or if it won't go too far off, and you can try to figure out what happened. maybe with a different run with modifications, but it makes it far easier, especially if you run it for long periods of time to do whatever you need to do. Now, we can go a little bit more complex into the prompting, and then I can show you this right here. And again, this will all be down in the description. But if you go down to this part right here, we can make different bots. And how this works is basically you're using one singular AI, so one singular LLM. You could use multiple, but I really haven't ran into a use case where that would be useful and that would be practical. But you could do that if you wanted to. But with all this, you're using one singular AI, one singular LLM, and this is role playing. So during this part is role playing as the coder. During this part is role playing as the critic, and it's telling it the critic needs to do whatever. Think of it like a play, like a movie or whatever it may be. And these are all actors. And then if you wanted to be a little bit more exact, your role is going to have you do whatever. Well, this is basically what that is you're telling the thing as it's role playing, it needs to follow within these terms. And this is pretty good because if you're having it code, then it will go behind itself and look at the syntax errors. Does it have good documentation? Does it have, is it good? And you can take a look at why it came up with the results it did. Like it will flat out tell you. So if we go here, and if I can find something, so that right here is critic. It can say the code is now well organized, easy to read, blah, blah, blah. And to further improve the code, it should do this. And then the coder is next. It says, whatever. Keep in mind it sometimes messes around like that. So keep that in mind. But if it's doing a one-on-one, and it tends to do it fairly well. So for example, improve the code, the coder should whatever, and then the coder goes ahead and does it. Then the critic does whatever down here, and it goes further on. So note that this is just basically role playing to get the actual task you're done needing to do. So if you tell it to do, and I'm seeing this with some tech YouTubers, they say you can make it be a business. Don't do that. If you tell it to be like a CTO or a CEO or something like that, then it will really try to play it as that. If you try to say marketing person, then it will really try to go to that level. You could get down to a level of saying you're Bob from marketing and you do these tasks. You're Jane from marketing and you do these tasks, and it goes down that list. But keep in mind that how this works is only one bot can communicate at a time. So if you do that, while you might have multiple coder bots, only one bot can do anything at any given time. So if coder bot's doing something, critic bots can't do it. And if like coder A is doing something, coder B, coder C, and critic and everything else can't do anything else. You can't even really prompt it until it is done. So note that it's only one at a time. There might be a way to get around this. I haven't really found it yet, and I'm probably going to be looking into this at some point. But for now, just keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that this might help the efficiency on its less problems if you have all these bots that hyper focus onto a particular thing instead of like a generalized coder bot. Now, as far as this goes, this is a newer thing and it's still being developed. Highly recommend it if you're going to be using your own personal AI and even some regular LLMs. Obviously, if you're like, I don't know, a city and you're trying to do something that helps people fill out forms and find the services they need and stuff like that, I don't know if this would be useful, but if you're a engineering firm or doing your own personal AI, maybe make your own personal AI assistant, this definitely would be useful. And this is GPT memory or Mem GPT, and basically this adds into long-term memory into it, and depending on how you set it up. I currently don't have it set up right now, and I might get into a later video into this, but depending on how you set it up, you could have it where it looks at its memory every so often and see if it should crap from that. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention with the autogen is it uses caching. So right here, you'll see request timeouts. This, if it takes forever, it'll just time out and it'll let you know. But seed is let you know the cache. So you can say 42 or whatever it may be. It's up to you to change the number. And anything within there, if it's the same type of prompt that's been done before, it will pull out the answer, so it doesn't make a API call. It just goes to the cache first. You may want this, you may not, so keep that in mind. And temperature is how creative it is. So if you're trying to get it to write a book, you might want to have that pretty high. Whereas if you're just doing basic, information gathering or basic things, then 0 is fine, or very low is fine. So note that. Now, with that, because it uses cache, it does have some memory, but it has to deal with prompts. So, say for example, if I type into it, in fact, let's modify this to say, "Hi, how are you?" And let's make sure it's running. And it's running. And note that I got several other things running at the same time. And the more simpler that you have this code above here, by the way, the quicker things can be. So as you see here, and again, the more simpler you got it, the quicker it's going to be. I got it doing quite a bit of things back and forth. So note that you might want to make a custom model per thing. But as you saw here, it responded back, and I can have a normal back and forth with it. And note, if I ask that same thing again, "Hi, how are you?" then it will go ahead and prompt this again. So I forgot to modify this part, and that was actually the hang-up. So I can ask it again, this to show an example. Oops, sorry about that. So let's grab that. And I can show you that instead of it actually going to the thing, it just basically goes and it doesn't worry about sending it to the thing if you have it going to the cache. So you can prompt it to do different things and whatever, but if you are if you're depending on what you're doing, is you can actually save a lot of resources back and forth on cache memory. The difference between that and this is you can say my name is X, and it will remember that long term. You can talk about certain things. So think of it like a psychology thing or maybe something else. You can say, "Oh, I like whatever," or "My birthday is whatever day." And if you gave it ability to look at the actual date and time, it may be able to see that and automatically tell you happy birthday without anything else. Note you still are limited in the aspect that you have to actually interact with it for it to interact with you. It's a one-on-one type of thing, unless if you code it in such a way where it can interact multiple times or whatever. But in any case, you have to somehow start it, and that's something that's still going to be a problem for quite some time. You're not going to have the thing just out of the blue say, "Oh, I found whatever." The thing requires your input to do whatever. So it's very task wise. I'll leave a link down below to this so you can take a look at this and use it if you want. Anyways, with that in mind, that's pretty much about it. If you want me to cover anything any more deeper, then feel free to let me know. And again, you can always use it like this, a normal interface, and that way people that way you can interact with it on a one-on-one basis if you don't need it to do all the other functionality. And you can get some interesting results from it depending on which LLM you use and whatnot. But as it's hopefully going to show soon, leave a like, subscribe, share, and I hope you have a great day, and hopefully this helps you out. Thank you for supporting the channel.